Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's having a good day and a good morning. And thank you for being here with me as we discuss creative portraits in fashion with Fujifilm GFX. Thank you for being here with me as we discuss creative portraits in fashion with Fujifilm GFX. Thank you for being here with me as we discuss creative portraits in fashion with Fujifilm. Okay. Thank you for being here with me. I don't. Okay. Well, let me just see if it, let's quit. Sorry, guys. Quit. Anyways, yeah, we should be good now. Sorry about that. Okay, so just to hop in, so my name is Kara Mercer, and I have been shooting for about 17, 18 years. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, and I am shooting fashion, portrait work, and a variety of types of design. And I've been really excited to talk with all of you today about what the what you can do with your fashion photography, because it's so inspiring that you can take fashion in so many different routes. And for me, it all started with wedding photos. I actually started with wedding and more like portrait work in Texas. And I was there for about 6 years, built an entire business doing portrait work and wedding work. And for me, I just wanted something a little bit more that was more inspiring, more that I could be more creative to use my art directing and my vision for what I wanted to bring to life. So for me, it was really about just branching out and trying new types of work. And I moved to the West Coast. So I've lived in Seattle and San Francisco. And those places were a huge inspiration for me for really changing the way that I saw fashion. I think most of us see fashion photography in magazines and at studios. And there's more and more on location now and in environments that are super beautiful, like our parks in the States, or even just like on location somewhere. So for me, that was such an inspiration and a pivot into fashion photography. So today we're going to talk a lot about what that kind of looked like for me and how I can help you with your fashion photography or portrait work. And just so you kind of know, these are some of my clients that I've worked for. I've my career has taken multiple paths in the last several years. Pre-pandemic, I was working with doing a lot of fashion brands, while also working with tourism boards like Visit Jordan, Visit Switzerland, Visit Austria. And it's been one of those really cool things where I've been able to use all my fashion expertise while shooting for some of these tourism boards. So I was shooting a mix of hospitality and architecture and drone work and video, as well as like all the portraits of the people and different fashion brands from different countries, which has been really, really cool and inspiring to be a part of. So just to kind of hop in, these are some of my favorite portraits. I wanted to kind of show you guys what my work looked like, because I don't know if some of you have had a minute to look through my portfolio, but I figured it might be a good way for you to kind of see what I'm doing and what I've done in the past, and maybe think of some questions along the way of what you might be curious about or how I can help you further what you're interested in today. So I always am of the perspective that I should shoot a variety of types of work and portraits wherever I am. So some of these are taken in Banff, Canada, in an airport of all places, and then also in Prague. So a couple years ago, Fujifilm did a world photo event in Prague, and there was this beautiful exhibition, and I had several fashion photos featured in that exhibition, and I also got to create a really cool fashion shoot and some video work with the team while I was in Prague. And the cafe that you're seeing to the right was one of those shots that we got to take. And then you'll also see on the far right, it's another one that we got to shoot. We waited for a bit for the highlights to kind of calm down. But this is a designer that was local to the Czech Republic. So it was really fun to work with her beautiful pieces and just try out some different types of fashion work in different countries. And I wanted to show you just a mix of the type of dance work that I've done. A little bit of backstory about me. Being from Texas, I grew up doing cheerleading and dance and ballet, and I actually cheered at Texas Tech for almost 3 years. And it was a very competitive like nature, and a place that really helped me kind of grow my work ethic. So a lot of my work is inspired by motion and movement and minimalism and beautiful shadows. And I think that's part of what makes portrait work so inspiring, is seeing these mixtures of motion and shadows. And the image on the bottom is one of my favorites. This is Jacob Jonas Company, is based out of LA. And that's who you're seeing in the dance photos, with the guy and the gal in the photo. And they are two of the most talented people I've ever met. So a lot of my work is inspired by a mix of types of dance and just playing with interesting lines and shadows. And then again, here you'll see how I shoot a lot of brand work for different types of companies. The bottom left image is actually shot in New Zealand for a travel company. And then the top two are for a few different fashion brands. And then the bottom right corner was for a Fujifilm launch event. And then I kind of mix a lot of skincare and still life within my work as well, which you'll see here with the shadows, with this skincare line. This was actually for a spa locally in the Seattle area. So you can see that I use a range of light and shadows. I'm not always operating in the same types of light. I love the use of backlight and beautiful sunlight, but I also find that strobes are so important in capturing a beautiful feel and emotion when it comes to fashion photography. So today I want to really jump into some key foundations. These are some foundations that I've found to be like some of the best ways to come at fashion photography. And I think a lot of people tend to just talk a lot about the lighting or the setup that they use. Sorry, my dog is sitting right here. She's like wagging her tail. Sit down. See, you can kind of see her, but anyways, so voice aesthetic is one, art directing is another, location, editing, gear and lighting, and then creating a story would also be the last one. So we're going to jump right in to these key foundations. Okay, so what makes an interesting portrait? I think these are some interesting thoughts to think of when you're coming at fashion photography, really thinking how you can hone your skills and make them better. So the first thing would be like light and framing. And then also, is it expected? Are you shooting something that's like out of the ordinary? Is the perspective something that's unique and something that someone's going to be inspired by? Also, feeling and emotion. You really want to have some type of movement and emotion and connection within that within that photo. So a lot of the time, if I'm not feeling like the model's really looking at me, or we're not connecting, or I just don't feel something from the photo, I'll keep pushing her or him to really let down their guard and facilitate an environment that allows them to be themselves and to have some fun with it and just engage with me in a more human to human connection. And then the last thing that is super important, I feel like, is toning. There's nothing I hate more than muddy skin when it comes to a portrait. So I'm always looking to clean up the whites and then create more highlights around the skin. As you can tell, like, she just has beautiful, soft, glowy skin. So I always will retouch skin to the point of that looks natural, not to the point where it looks overdone. Because I think even in our society today, it's important to find that balance, so we can have a healthy idea of what femininity and womanhood or whatever it is actually feels to each and every one of us. And then the next thing I wanted to mention is what curation really means. I think this is a really important key thought to really take in before you approach growing your fashion work is your voice, your aesthetic, and art directing equals curation. So you always want to curate the photos that you're taking and not have something that's just standing in front of you. You need to think about the styling and what you actually want to be saying with these photos. So these are some examples of how I've honed and created my own voice and aesthetic over the last 17 years. So some of those things is you can learn over time and you have consistency with shooting. So if you have not had a lot of experience with fashion photography, I would urge you to just keep test shooting, experimenting with different types of lenses, different types of gear, shoot with multiple types of models that have different variations of skin tone, because it's very important to be able to edit all types of skin tone really well. And I find that that's the biggest thing and the most amazing thing that you can learn early on in your career. And then also learning how to style and even just get those playful moments out of a scene. For myself, I will just play some music and have the models move around and interact with each other. And sometimes they feel really awkward, and that's okay. We're just all having fun and engaging. And then also choose to carry over this voice and aesthetic over to your website and your work as well. And just to follow up on the voice and aesthetic, so these are some other images that I've shot for a magazine with a fashion brand. And for me, I always find inspiring thoughts that I want to go down, or I'll make a journal note of, okay, I want to do this artistic floral type of look. And we actually shot this in a parking lot of all places. The light was not ideal where we were going to be shooting outside. So we actually drove and rolled out this green paper that was so beautiful and shot in the parking lot of a church. So the light was really beautiful. I used a strobe with some softbox images on some of these, and I'll give you all of my gear list in a minute as well. And so ProPhoto is my go-to typically for this type of work. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the lighting in just a minute. Sorry, my dog is literally, she's like, I need to go outside right now, which is so annoying. And but that's life, right? So I will just, hopefully she'll hang with us. But so for our brand, the logo, voice, and font usage is really important. So when you're thinking about your voice and aesthetic, it's not just going to be like how you're shooting. Hold on, I'm going to tell my husband to let her out. I'm really sorry, guys. Oh gosh. Okay, he's going to let her out. So there's consistency within your brand, and it's not all over the map. Sorry. Oh gosh, Zoe, no. So you want to rework your copy and your offerings on your website. And then think of like brands that you want on your bucket list. So if I were you now, I would make a list of some of the brands that you would love to work with, and think of ways that you can connect and even create shoots that are within your voice and aesthetic. And then the next thing I want to mention is art directing. So a lot of us don't have experience within art directing and making it feel natural. And I think sometimes when you're new to portrait work, that is one of the biggest obstacles, is making something feel natural and that you feel inspired by. So if you have a story in mind, I would map that story out and really think through, how can I tell this story in a unique way? What types of lighting do I want to use? What types of angles, and how do I want this story to come to life? So some of the examples that I've shown here are some of the funniest stories. The top one with the chickens, they actually escaped, and it was for this story feature for Bellevue Lifestyle magazine. And we were shooting this family, and we were shooting her food recipes to share. And basically the chickens escaped while we were shooting, and we had to go chase them down. And instead of just waiting for them to catch all of them, I followed them and I let the story unfold in front of my lens. So you always want to do, you want to follow the story as it's happening, whether you have to instigate it or you have to create the scene, or you just, it's actually happening and you don't have to do anything but just be a part of that and what's happening in front of your lens. You also just want to look for leading lines, make sure everything's straight. It's hard to restructure a framing like the one with the pool where you see the snow in the background on the far left, if you don't have a good handle on how to frame something in person. Because even if I had gone up or down just a little bit, that line would have gone across her head. So being very purposeful about where you put people in a frame, even with landscapes, you want to make sure someone's head is above the horizon line or within a part of like a mountain where it's like more contrast between their skin tone and the depth of the mountain color. So really think about where you're placing your subject within a scene. And is it helping your image or is it taking away from your image? The next thing I'll mention is I love to create just random scenes with different types of inspiring moments. And this was actually for a wine brand that I shot recently. And we just created this beautiful headdress out of these beautiful grapes that it took us a while. They were like falling off mid-frame, which was actually really tricky. Because if she moved at all, it was also stabbing her in the head on parts of it. So we were having to keep changing where the actual band was on her head, as well as like where the grapes were sitting. And then she's trying to move and look natural. So it's really important in these scenarios to empower people with your words and just help them to feel natural. Like she looks like she's super zenned out, but she's actually not. It's a huge, pokey, prickly band of like curved wood that's holding on to this whole headpiece. And then I actually photoshopped out the wiring where you can see some of it through the grapes. But always looking for small details. I think taking out that wiring gives a more ethereal, magical vibe. Whereas if you had seen some of the wiring in the shot, it wouldn't have been as inspiring. So knowing what things to remove from an image and how to direct your subject is very important for the outcome of what you will feel when you look at the image. Another really good example of art directing would be this scene. I shot this for a cover for Bellevue Lifestyle magazine. I shoot for a lot of magazines, whether it be fashion or lifestyle or architecture, interiors. And movement is one of the key pieces of art directing and making sure that those scenes don't cross over. So as you can imagine, shooting this type of work is kind of, it can be dangerous if you're standing in the wrong place and that ball comes flinging at you. So I had them cross over where you could see the horse's hooves off the ground. So I intentionally structured it with the mountains behind them. I got low to the ground so you could have the horses more above the horizon. And then they're actually still in motion, and they're holding their mallets upward toward the sky and at an angle. And we actually had them bounce the ball on the mallet on the the top image. So we could get that motion and the ball moving, but it's not like flinging right toward my camera. So good tip is think of ways that you can create that motion, but also keep yourself safe and other people around you as you're trying to get those shots. And then location. Location is very important for creating a vision and a vibe that you want that's consistent. So this is a piece I did on fashion and motherhood. So the project was called Motherhood and Careers. So some of these women are the most talented women within our industry. And what I wanted to convey in this is skin tones. I wanted to celebrate women of all walks of life, all nationalities and cultures. And a way to do that was to create this same backdrop with different women and different stories, which it all stood out because it was all the same backdrop. So I did that on purpose. Whereas there's some scenes where had I chosen to use their house or some type of more busy backdrop, you would have been distracted by all the other elements. So learning what to deplete from an image is just as important of what you keep in the image. And for me, like having that location, we shot all of these in a studio with strobes. I used the Profoto B10s with the XL umbrellas on too. So they were on both sides. So I wanted the light to be even for one. I wanted the location to look the same, the backdrop to look the same. And then I also used props that were fun for the kids, and it wasn't just like a boring scene that they couldn't just be themselves. So that's really important to think through your location. Is it helping you or is it hindering you when it comes to the outcome of your photos? So another good example of like location tips would be outdoor scouting prior to your shoot. This is a shoot I did for Pauline Paris. They're a bag company based out of Paris and France, and they have some of the most amazing shapes and styles, and their aesthetic is just something I've always loved. And in part of choosing this location, I wanted it to be minimal and beautiful, but also earthy, because that's really their brand vision. And I wanted it to complement the models and the styling that we had. So we kept the styling pretty minimal, the makeup more minimal. And then I used a lot of earth elements like the sky to really bring out the tones of the nude color of the bag, as well as like the rock that we used. So because we had a gradation in the rock from the bottom up, you could see the color tones of these purses much better. So I think it's important to think of everything all together when you're thinking about art directing and your voice and your aesthetic, and is this location going to give you the outcome that you want? And then I think the biggest thing too, after you've created all of these images and you've thought through all of these steps, is the editing portion. I think sometimes fashion, it can go multiple ways when you want to edit an image, meaning you could be very artsy about it, but I think that type of style and editing fades over time, and having something that's timeless and consistent and that won't date is really important. So learning how to retouch skin really beautifully, how to get that perfect motion. And like this shot specifically was at the Blue Lagoon in Iceland, and I had her stand in front of the door that goes outside, and the wind blew her hair in this beautiful like S curve. And those types of things don't just happen. I think that it's important to note that you have to wait for things to happen. You have to instigate things and be really purposeful about the content that you're trying to create. And for me, when it comes to editing, I create my own presets. And that's been a way for me to really hone my style and my aesthetic, and make sure that my clients are really happy with the outcome. And then more on editing, I try to lean toward less is more. So if it's a bruise or if it's acne, things like that, I'll take those out because they're not a forever type of thing. And I'll also think about the lighting conditions that I used. You want to keep the same lighting conditions through the whole set if possible, or even a subset, because it can be hard to keep the color the same from start to finish if you don't think in subsets and you keep changing your light through different sections of the shoot. And then there's also programs that I love to shoot or to use: Luminar, Lightroom, Photoshop, Alien Skin. Those are all really great tools for your editing process. And then we'll jump right into gear. Some of the gear that I think gear makes all the difference. I've been a Fujifilm shooter for, gosh, almost 10 years. And Fujifilm has really changed the game for me. For all my fashion work, I use GFX. But these are the gear that I have in my toolkit at all times. I love the GFX 100, the 100S. I sometimes will use the 52, the GFX 52S. Sorry, the 52. Yes. Sorry, mixing things around in my head, but I use that camera as well as sometimes if I need some good motion, I'll use the X-T5. For some clients, I'll shoot video as well as photos. And so, for instance, this week I shot with Saison. They're beautiful. They make beautiful women's clothing. They're based out of France and they're opening multiple stores in the States. And I shot video reels for them, some stills, and then also their interiors for their store. And in doing that, the XH2S was really amazing in shooting video. I loved what it captured and what we were able to create with that camera. And then for shooting fashion, I love to tether with Capture One. I also really love Tether Tools. It's a great company that has like shoe carts and stands and just different types of resources for gear that you could use for on location or in a studio. And then the lenses that are kind of my go-to for fashion would be 32 to 64, 120, and then the 110. If you haven't tried GFX for portrait or fashion work, I would highly encourage you to go check it out because it is hands down the most beautiful camera. The skin tones that come out of GFX is just unmatched. I've used multiple types of gear. I used to be a Canon shooter many years ago, and not trying to knock anyone within this the realm of options, but I've just really loved what GFX has done for my work, and my clients are really happy with what we've been able to achieve with all of these, all of the shoots that we've done. And we'll let you guys ask questions about gear and more of this. So please like save any questions you have and then drop them in the chat box and we'll answer all of those as well. And then a few of the lighting recommendations that I would say would be ProPhoto is my go-to. I have an account on ProPhoto for their educational platform. And on there, I post a lot of like my setups, my outcome of what my final shot was, as well as like the different types of modifiers that I'm using. So if you are curious, jump on the Share the Light Academy on ProPhoto and you'll see a lot of those setups. And it's super inspiring to see multiple uses of light. And I love to mimic natural light with a lot of my own work, but there are studio setups that I've done for multiple clients that are a little bit more involved and really fascinating to see how that setup actually happened. But for modifiers, I love a good octabox, a beauty dish. I love large, deep umbrellas just for like a more even tone, as well as barn doors and then like a reflector if I'm outside. And then, so just to kind of say, to share our last key topic would be to create a story. I think much of the time when we see fashion images out there, there's not a full cohesive set. And I think that's what falls short, is creating a cohesive set that makes you feel something. A lot of my work, I love tone on tone. I love mixing it with nature and different types of light and using different types of shapes. So I had envisioned the image on the top right in my head the night before I shot this camera launch for GFX. And it was for Fujifilm, and we had a crew out in the Painted Hills, and it was absolutely stunning. And I knew that I wanted these layers of shapes. I specifically put their hands above the mountain where you see the ridge line, so you could see the connection. The storyline for this one was about two sisters and what it's like to have that close connection, but also have these like push and pull moments, just like any sisters do. So that was really part of what I was trying to portray within this shoot. And then, as you can see, like it progressed into a more intimate connection between the two. So I think of this moment as when you're kids, when you're just playing outside and you're just daydreaming about life and you're picking flowers and like you're just like sitting with each other. So the model actually picked a flower and it was really inspiring to me just watching them, because we were trying to decide if we were going to stay in this location or move to another spot before dusk had completely set in. And it just happened to be that they were sitting in the grassy area picking some flowers, and I just kind of had this beautiful moment and idea, so we went with it, and I could not have been happier. So what you saw in the slide just before, I'll show you. This slide was actually the same scene and shoot. The top right and the left image were from the same shoot as the one that you're just seeing. Sorry, it's kind of slow. So they are from the same subset. So I think it's really important to kind of pay attention to what's happening to you in front of your camera, and to enhance your work by using this storyline and mapping it out and drawing it out before you actually get to your shoot. And don't be afraid to try different types of light. I use direct sunlight, I use even sunlight, I'll use rim light. You name it, I have used it for multiple types of shoots for my clients. And it's just really inspiring to not just see somebody using the same type of light for everything that they're shooting. And then you also want to make it fun. Everything that I'm doing, I want it to be an adventure. I want it to feel fun. And so for instance, the image on the left was shot on a ferry for Filson. And I'm always looking for these elements where I can create a story in a unique place, whether it be using unique settings, beautiful settings, or lighting that's just kind of interesting and crazy. The image on the bottom was actually, the sunlight was coming through a grate in a parking garage of all places. So it's the irony of some of these shots is you would never expect these to be the places that I've captured these images, but if you're looking and you're open to it, you're going to see where these spots are going to be inspiring to you and how it can really change the look and the feel of your own fashion work. And then this is another one I shot for Filson on the ferry. There was this beautiful sailboat that was out in the background. I just wanted it to feel very raw, very undone, because Filson is very much about adventure and outdoors. So every time I'm thinking about what I'm shooting, I'm thinking about the client. And is this client going to want this vibe or this feel or this lighting? And that's always something you should be thinking about when you're taking each shot for a client. And the last thing I want to jump in is just kind of share some about social media. I feel like this is always a question that comes across for me, and how to get your work noticed from brands and companies. And I think a big one for me has been just simply creating and sharing on social media. I think we all get caught up in our work and being over perfectionist about what it looks like, and do we share this image? Do we share that image? And I think the answer is just to keep creating and sharing at whatever that is, in whatever medium you prefer, like whether it's Instagram or it's TikTok or whatever. I think it's really important to just keep striving to create for yourself, create for your brands. And then these are some recommendations that I always tell a lot of people when I'm mentoring, as far as like how to grow your audience. And the biggest thing is just to have strong work, to keep honing your lighting skills, share that work, and then also just keep experimenting. I did not get where I am today with shooting fashion and portrait work by just taking on the work that comes to me. I'm always seeking out test shoots, always meeting new people in the industry, whether it be stylists that are clothing stylists or prop stylists, and just making sure you align with them and finding people that just really see life and a vision the same as you, or a shoot that you're trying to create. And then the biggest thing I can also say is be a part of the community. There's nothing better than growing from other people. Even just events like this, coming and saying hi, connecting with people, it creates a much more real connection where you can learn from people every day if you're open to it. And then the last thing we'll do is just some questions. And then if you want to follow along, this is my Instagram account right here. I run a commercial photography workshop called the Rev Workshop. It's an incredible way for people to learn more about commercial photography. We talk about various types of photography, whether it be still life, food, fashion photography, architecture, interiors. This has been a huge game changer for our industry, specifically for just learning and kind of cutting down on the gatekeeping of information. I think it's really important that we pass on the knowledge we have and we better our industry by setting the bar for sharing how we create estimates and how we tether things and how the tools that we use in the programs. And I am a huge proponent for transparency in that way. And the Rev Workshop really strives to give that transparency and level up for the clients or for your personal work that you're trying to create. So if you're interested, it's therevworkshop.com, or you can connect with us on Instagram as well. And please come say hi to me on Instagram. My handle's _Kara Mercer. Pardon the underscore. Could not get my actual name without it. So in any case, I will turn it over to questions. And thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to escape into question mode and open the chat. Okay, so the first question that I see is, what is your color correction workflow when using strobes on location with mixed light temperatures in the immediate environment? Gray card, color card, checker. How much do you get in camera on location? How much do you hand over to post-production? That's a really good question. Thank you so much for asking that. I think there are so many variables when it comes to finding the best lighting and the best color balance, specifically when I think strobes do a lot to clean up the light and the color balance, whether it be coming from outdoors or a painted wall that can be distracting. So for me, I always use a color card. I try to correct as much in camera. I also set my Kelvin in camera, and that's been another way for me to really set my white balance at the shoot and not have to do so much in post-production work. But I will say there's always going to be scenarios where you have to tweak that white balance and you really have to go in there post-production and put some gradient layers in and then just create some better adjustments. I will say though, for me personally, I always try to fix as much as possible in camera because it's 1,000 times easier. I think after this many years, I've realized that when you don't do that, it takes that much longer in post-production to get the photos finished. And I think time is money, and you want as much time back in life as you can get. So really using a color card, also checking the balance on your strobes. ProPhoto has a temperature balance within the light itself as well. So sometimes I'll use that and I'll adjust. But for the most part, I try to find an even lighting at the shoot, and then I will adjust things before we start the actual shoot. So I'll take like a few test shots. I'll check out the test shot. I'll look at the balance of color. I'll tether it. Sometimes I'll see it in Capture One and I'll make adjustments on the image to see how it's going to edit. And then from there, I keep shooting. So hopefully that answers your question. And then I'll jump into the next one. Pedro, your question was, what type of AF do you recommend for portraits in GFX systems, single or continuous? I like to do continuous if there's motion. Everything I'm shooting is all manual, so I'm using manual settings. I'm usually in continuous for AF because I want to be able to capture that motion, and if things are happening quickly, GFX sometimes can have like a slower movement. It's just the nature of medium format, and GFX is like, for instance, like if I was shooting my kids on a GFX, that would be much harder than a X series camera. So for like my kids or fast motion or something on set that I need a little bit faster shutter, I will bring my X-T5 and I'll use that on set as well. So I hope that answers your question as well. And Brian has a question of, being in Seattle, have you ever done grunge portrait work, or has the grunge movement come to an end in Seattle? That's a good question. I have not done a bunch of grunge, to be honest. I just really don't love the grunge vibe. I love more of a clean look. I do think street photos, like if it was more of a street photo scene, or like if it was for a rapper or someone like that has more of an edgy vibe, I would totally consider it. But I just haven't had it's not where I lean specifically in that style realm, but I absolutely would be open to it with the right client. And then the next question from Sean, understanding that fashion and portrait photography is how you make a living. How often would you say you go out and just shoot for the joy of it compared to how much you shoot for work? I I would strongly urge all of you to just go shoot for the fun of it. There's nothing more invigorating and that keeps you on your toes and like avoids burnout like going to shoot something for yourself. So even if a client, like for instance, I'll give you a really great example. This week, I was shooting Cezanne's video content, and we had the models from 9 to 4. And Seattle decided to be really, really sunny, which, as you can imagine, with video was not ideal, even with a ND filter. It just was not the look that I was like imagining for Seattle in these videos, but it turned out beautifully. But I will say, I was like, I just need some golden light. I need some beautiful golden light to wrap up this video, to give me some like beautiful, like aesthetic and feel through the whole thing. So I ended up shooting, I have a floral designer and stylist friend who we worked together on a lot of projects, and she was like, I'll come model in the outfit. And so we literally went to the beach, created a floral scene, used the beautiful bags that Cezanne had and all the clothing. So we added that to the deliverables because it was just something that was worth capturing. So I will always urge people to go above and beyond for your clients as well as for yourself, to really just keep yourself inspired, because I think you can be really uninspired the more you just take on work that comes to you. But I am a full proponent of put out the work in the world that you want back, or otherwise you just won't, that work won't come to you. So you just really need to speak what you want out of your photography. And then the next question is, what do you think is the average amount of light you use in studio shoot? It depends on what the look and the vibe is for my clients. I love to do there were a few examples within the presentation that have more of a harsh, stark light, whereas I love to play with that type of light. And then there's some that are more wide open that mimic natural light or more of an airy feel. It's really going to be driven by what the client wants in the outcome and what their brand vision. So most of these companies have art directors, and they have marketing people that have already established the look and feel of their brand. And we talk through all of that beforehand before we ever get on set and take any of the frames. And I think it's important to figure that out with a client first. But if you're just doing it for yourself, for me personally, I love to mix natural light with strobes. I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's really airy, and it makes the clothing stand out. It makes the model stand out. But then I also love to use like harsh shadows and just look more at the jewelry and more at their eyes. And if I'm looking for more of a beauty shot, I might make it more moodier or use a beauty dish on a shot like that. And then the next question is, what's your top go-to way for sparking your inspiration? I love to journal different types of ideas. I've had ideas that I've like saved for years in a journal, and it kind of comes from music. It comes from designers. It comes from just like things I've seen on travels, and even just like inspiring by like fashion, that like new fashion designers. I will save a lot of those concepts and ideas and formulate my own from there, and basically execute it with a team in off season. I do feel like if you're a busy photographer and you're already shooting a lot of fashion or portraiture, it's really important to create those shoots. And maybe there's a stylist and a makeup artist and a hairstylist that you would love to work with. I would highly recommend creating those relationships with people and just keep going after that work, because it's really fun to see like what ideas they may have and then what ideas you brought to the table and how all of those blend together so seamlessly. And then the next question is, with everyone talking about AI affecting photography, what are your thoughts on that in general? And what about specifically for fashion photography industry? I do think AI has a place within fashion photography and photography in general. I mean, we're already seeing it help people get through portrait sessions faster. But I will say, I think that clients that want a more custom look, it's next to impossible, at least currently, to create that within AI. I think AI has a lot of great I think we're in a place where this is a very complicated answer too. So please take this with a grain of salt, because this is a day and age where I think everyone's in two different camps. And when it comes to someone's livelihood, it can be a really dicey answer. So I will say, I think AI is an incredible tool for photographers, and I don't think we should fight it in the way of like, no AI. Do I think there should be regulations around how it's used only for the sake of like bringing positivity and balance? I think, yes, everything needs some type of regulation around it. But I do think that AI is going to be an incredible tool for photographers. It may initially weed out some people that are new fashion photographers, but it doesn't mean that you can't grow to be better and do better work. I think it's just going to be one of those things where you just have to keep honing your skills to create that level of work. But I'm not sure if AI could actually be like, oh, put the ProPhoto light on these manual settings and such to create the same type of light and vibe. So to sum it up for you, I think that there are going to be some brands that have a budget that they're trying to stick to, and they don't have that kind of budget to fully conceptualize it with a team. But then there's going to be the companies like Dior that will always hire their same people and use more of a custom, personal, real human feel to it. So hopefully that answers your question. And then the next question is, I'm having a tough time finding work in LA as a fashion photographer. Any advice? If I were you, I would make a bucket list of clients that you want to be working with and really start reaching out to them. I am not afraid of going to LinkedIn and finding people's emails and connecting with them that way, or even asking friends, whether they're like Digitex or art directors, for a recommendation. Like maybe they'll email you and connect you with that person because they may have worked with them at different companies. I think just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think a lot of the time in our world, people think that the work's just going to come to you and magically you're going to get all these emails. And that's just not how life works. It's not how anything works, basically. I think that you have to put the wheels in motion and really put yourself out there. So look at your website, make sure everything's honed in, you have a versatility or an amount of work, and then also just start reaching out to people. You could probably get some marketing directors emails through Instagram. And yeah, I would go down that route first don't give up. I think it's not meant for, this industry is not meant for the weak. You definitely have to keep reaching out to companies and maintaining those relationships and going above and beyond for your clients. And then tips on dealing with rejection from brands. I think this is an interesting one. I had one this week, I think it's important to talk about the wins and the downs and all the things, because that's what real life is. I had a skincare company this week reach out from LA, and they were doing a shoot in Oregon. And there was just like we were trying to decide on the dates. They only had the end of September open, and it was already like a quick turnaround. And I think it was one of their first shoots. And I think work that's meant to be yours will be yours. And I think learning to not take it personally, and maybe even asking people what you could have done differently, or maybe like, what was it that didn't work for this campaign? I would love to hear those thoughts. I'm not afraid to ask those questions to people. For this one specifically, they were like, well, the dates didn't work, but they didn't tell me that the dates didn't work, meaning like they decided they didn't work. And instead of telling me the real reason why they went a different route, they told me the dates didn't work. And I was like, well, that's frustrating. But at the same time, I think it's really important to just ask. So that's what I did. I was like, I really loved connecting with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. I would love to know, what led you down another route, and like, is there something I could be doing differently as a freelancer, as a business owner? So owning those things is a way to take back that power and to not internalize things, because you're always going to win some and you're always going to lose some. So knowing that and just accepting it early on in your career is really important for sanity. But yeah, does anyone else have any other questions? I would love to hear them if you do, but I have thoroughly enjoyed being here today with all of you, and it's been so much fun just to talk about my work. And then we'll see if some more questions come in. But yeah, if you did want to learn more about fashion photography, more about like what it takes to be in this commercial space, whatever type of work you want to be shooting, like I said, the Rev Workshop is a great place to do that. I also do a lot of mentoring for people all across the US, even some in Europe. There's just great resources for that. So I would definitely urge all of you to reach out anytime you have questions. My Instagram was listed, but it's @_ KARAMERCER. So, and I'm sure we'll have all of this linked in the notes as well. But we'll wait a minute to see if there's any other questions. But yeah, while we kind of wait a few minutes, I can talk through some more lights. So I just got the B10 Plus lights for ProPhoto, and those have been a game changer for me. I love B10 and B10 Plus because they're cordless. Those lights are amazing to bring on location. And then I just bring sandbags to kind of hold them up, because sometimes the umbrella can be a little heavy, but I have loved utilizing those on location for my clients. And they're also easier to move around in the studio as well. But we'll see if there's any other questions before we like pop off. I will say too, like, I think it's amazing and really rewarding to work with brands that see your value. So on the note of AI, I think there's always going to be brands that are more transactional in feeling, and maybe they have more of a scope of budget they're trying to follow. But then there's also going to be high-end brands that are looking for something really custom and really beautiful. And I think that, human beings can create that really beautiful custom feel. And I think that's really important and valuable. Okay, it looks like that's it for our questions, but I want to thank you guys all for being here, and please reach out via DM. Again, my Instagram's @_ Kara Mercer, KARAMERCER. And then the Rev Workshop is just the REV Workshop on Instagram. So we'd love to have you guys. Our next one's in November. So we have a few more tickets left, and it'll be here in Seattle at the Graduate Hotel. So thank you guys for having me. And I look forward to doing this again in the future. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week.